All right. So, welcome everyone. My name is Julia. I'm a scientific engagement manager at Protocol Studio. Welcome to the Tips and Tricks webinar today. So, this is a little bit more of one of our advanced webinars where we dive into some of the deeper functionality. If you are a bit newer to Protocol Studio, that's okay too. You can still stay on the webinar today, but just know that we will be skipping some of the more basic overviews of the platform. But if that is the situation for anyone today, what I will do is I'll put in the chat a link to one of our more introductory webinars. And this is a past recording, so you have that handy if you'd like to go back and watch it. Welcome, Anna from Portugal as well. So I'll start off with a little bit of housekeeping. So I've gone ahead and started the recording for the webinar. Everybody who's registered will receive the link to the recording as well as the slides that I will use today, although most of the presentation will be on Protocol Studio rather than in the slides. Closed captioning should also be enabled if you'd like to use them. And if you are more comfortable listening in another language as well, I'll show you on the next slide how you can turn on translations for those closed captions. There will be time as well at the end of the webinar for Q&A. If you have any questions that pop into your head during the presentation, please add them to the Q&A or to the chat. It's just me monitoring the chat today, but if there is one that I see that's relevant to what I'm presenting, then I can try and answer it as well. Keep in mind as well that there will be the opportunity to give feedback on this webinar at the end as well. So if there's something that you think maybe we didn't cover today or would like to hear more about, note that down and you'll have the opportunity to suggest that. And so for anyone who does want to enable translations in your Zoom window, you'll see the Show Captions button. So you can click that, and then you will be prompted to select the language and save that. And then those captions will be auto-translated for you. So to start off today, I'm going to give a very brief overview and recap of Protocol Studio. So as people might know, the mission of Protocol Studio is to help manage your methods before, during, and after publication. And so you can transition through the different stages of your research. So we want you to be able to search and find methods that are really useful to you, and then organize and optimize those methods to tweak them for your specific research. And that can happen in your own private workspace before you're ready to share openly. But then when you are ready to share, it's very easy to do so and push those methods on to the public side of the platform. To enable this workflow, there are two sides to Protocol Studio. And so first and foremost, Protocol Studio is an experimental workflow tool. So it's designed to be used when you're planning your work, when you're running your experiments, when you're troubleshooting as those methods evolve. And so you don't need to decide immediately when you're first working on the platform if you're going to be sharing that method later. You can start private, you can keep it private, and then share that method when you're ready to do so. But there's lots of functionality on this on the private side of the platform that allows you to track that method as it evolves, and to do that in a collaborative way within the others in your lab, or if you are working in a more global consortium, collaborating across multiple countries. And so because when you are using that private side of Protocol Studio and you're working in a really structured format from day one, when you do finally come to publishing those methods for a manuscript that you want to publish to comply with funder requirements, or just to make that available to a collaborator, you're already 90% done with the work, and it's really easy with a click of the button to publish that. And so that open sharing becomes a really nice benefit of having good, rigorous workflows from the start. And so a nice example of that as well, when we're thinking about publishing via Protocol Studio, is this idea of modular publishing. So if you think of your protocol, it's one module of many different research outputs that might be linked to a research paper. And so um, you can then link that to your paper along with those other outputs. And so we can see a really nice example of that here. In the data availability statement, they've said that the expression constructs are on AdGene, the methods are in Protocol Studio, and the molecular structure is on the protein data bank. And really key there is that all of those different outputs are in the specific repository that is fit for their purpose. And so Protocol Studio is specifically built for methods. You might be familiar with this as well in our more advanced webinar today, but all the protocols on Protocol Studio are in a dynamic and interactive format. So unlike something that is perhaps a static PDF or Word document, the protocols on Protocol Studio, you can comment on them, you can update them over time, you can run them as checklists, and you can add in interactive components. So things like tables, videos, scalable amounts, to really make those protocols as reproducible and reusable as possible. And I also really encourage you to kind of search the public content on the platform, explore how other people have, what functionality other people have added into their protocols so that you can understand that some of the things that you can add that go beyond writing your protocol in a text-based format. I'll show some of that as well today. So before I jump out of the slides and onto Protocol Studio, I did want to give an overview of some of the terminology that we use. And so on Protocol Studio, to enable you to track how a method evolves over time, you or others can create what we call versions or forks of a method. And so I'll talk a little bit about the differences between those. So if we think about a version, you have version 1 of your protocol, and then you might want to make an improvement on that protocol. And I have a little recipe analogy that I'm going to use to explain that today. So if you have a chocolate cake recipe, any change that you make to that recipe to make that chocolate cake sweeter or less dry would be a new version of that recipe. And so if we think about that in a scientific context or research context, it might be rectifying an error in a step, providing additional information, or just optimizing a step for a workflow that works better. And on Protocol Studio, of course, version 2 is going to be linked to version 1. And anyone can create a new version. But if we think about publishing that new version, only the person who is the owner of version 1 can publish version 2 and so on, because it would be an improvement or modification on their specific method. And so on the Protocol Studio platform, you can see at the top of a method, and you can navigate between the different versions there. You can compare the differences as well. So how that method has evolved is very transparent and trackable. Then if we think about what the difference between a fork and a version is. So if we go back to our recipe analogy, and we think about our chocolate cake recipe, maybe I know that it's a really good chocolate cake recipe, but I want to modify it to change the type of cake so that it's going to be maybe a vanilla cake or a lemon cake. We've got our yellow color here. And so while this recipe is based upon this recipe, they're making something slightly different. And so that is when you would use a fork on protocol studio. So in a research context, that might be if you are making modifications to a protocol for a different sample type, species, or strain, or different pieces of equipment, various situations. And on Protocol Studio, we can see anyone can create a new fork and anyone can publish a new fork. So someone else could take your published protocol, adapt it for a different situation, and publish that as well. But if they do that, we can see that clearly at the top, it says where that protocol has been forked from. So if someone adapts your protocol, credit will still be maintained back to you as the original protocol developer of the protocol that they adapted. Those are probably the main things that you will encounter day to day on Protocol Studio. The last option is maybe used a little bit less often. And so that's if you just want to create a copy of a protocol. And so really the only people that can create a copy is if you are the owner of a specific protocol. You can't copy someone else's protocol. And when you would create a copy is to really use that protocol and the metadata around it as a template. So if we go back to our recipe analogy, maybe in all of these cake recipes, I have the supporting information there that says this recipe was developed in Julia's lab using XYZ funding, things like that. And I want to keep all of that information, but I'm not even making a cake recipe anymore. It's a completely unrelated chicken recipe, for example. And we can see this is where someone's done that on Protocol Studio. They published a collection of multiple different protocols, but they all had very similar authors and funding requirements. So they could just create a copy instead of filling that information out over and over again. If you do want to read a little bit more or refer back to the differences between these, we do have a help article linked at the top here that you can read as well. So what I'll do now is I will jump out of the slides and into protocols.io. And so because we are covering some more advanced topics today, I will be assuming a certain level of knowledge with protocols.io. And so that is searching for the public content, kind of the basics of workspaces, maybe importing and publishing protocols. If you aren't familiar with that, it is fairly straightforward and you can go back and look at that intro link that I put into the chat earlier. And then we can see, so these are some of the topics that I will be covering today. So with that, I will stop sharing this slide and then I will go ahead and share on to the Protocol Studio platform. Let me get my screen set up. Okay, so we are now on Protocol Studio in my demo workspace. So I'll start off talking a little bit about some of the more advanced sharing on Protocol Studio. So if you are working in a workspace, you might know that anyone who's within that workspace would potentially have access to view and edit all the files within that workspace. But you can share individual files and tailor that sharing as well. So I'll share one example of that. We select this protocol here and I go to share. I can see how I've shared this protocol. And so I use this protocol across lots of different demos and trainings. So it's in a few different places. So this is the original location, and we can see that I've actually shared this protocol with other workspaces. So not just with individuals, but with groups of people as well. And in all of these situations, those groups of people, they're only able to view it. But I could change that and give them edit access or give them a very limited view of that file as well if I wanted to. And so if I want to add more accesses there, I can click to select add more, and then I can choose if I want to share it with one or a small group of people, or if I want to share it with a whole workspace. And when I share it with an entire workspace, that file will be visible in that workspace. They can organize it into folders, however they want to in that workspace, but all the changes to that one file will be synced across all the workspaces that it is shared to. So I won't go ahead and share that. But that's a little bit of an overview on sharing. There is some more flexibility rather than, kind of the standard sharing that you might be familiar with. What I'll move on to now is some more advanced editing within protocols. So I've got a couple of examples here. We have various functionality that can be added into the protocols, and that spans a lot of disciplines as well. So it's not just for wet lab-based research, but we see people publishing across multiple disciplines, including computational-based work as well. So I'm going to show some examples of that here. So this is a computational protocol that's been published on the platform. So I can go down and I can see some of the information that they've shared. So some information on how to prepare the files, and they've highlighted what commands are used. They've linked out to different software packages. So this might give you an idea of what things you could add in if you're drafting up a computational protocol. And I will put that link into the chat as well. If people want to refer back to it. And then the other example I've prepared here is a little bit more of a wet lab-based protocol. And so we can see as well. So they've put some different components in this protocol. They're highlighting things here like temperature, amounts, time. Those are all really important variables when you're running an experiment in the lab, as you may be aware. And they've added in the timings for each of those steps too. And so I'll talk about this a little bit later, but when you do add this information in this component format, it means that that information is a lot more readable by the system and a lot more reusable. So if you were, for example, running this protocol, you could do things like scale these amounts up and down, depending on how you are following this protocol. And I will put that link into the chat too. All right. And so let's move on into the protocol that we will be editing today. So let me wait for that to load. So right now I'm in the protocol editor. And so there's a few different areas of this protocol editor that you can use to add different pieces of functionality into the protocol. So you can be adding in steps, sub-steps, sections, and what I'll show later is step case here on the left. You can add in various things via the toolbar here on the top. Make sure that you're exploring the different tabs of the protocol as well. And then mostly where I'll be working today is adding different components into this protocol. So I'll start off here. You can see I've already added in different sections for the topics that we're going to be covering and different steps as well. So we're going to start off on this step 4. So if I want to add in, for example, an amount component, if you've already typed that information in as text, you can simply highlight it, click on the amount, and that will convert that into a component. And so I'll do that for all of these options here. And then I've added some example reagents, and you can also add these in as a reagent component. So I will go in here I'm going to look up just a random buffer. For these reagents, we do pull in lists from various different vendor catalogs. So you can add in the exact reagent that you are using. So let's see. We've got a lot of antibodies here, so I'll just select this one as an example. And you can see what it does is it puts all of that information associated with that specific reagent. So if we think about antibodies specifically, it can be really important where you got that antibody, the lot number of that antibody, because that can impact whether that protocol is going to work or not. So you can include all of that information there. Moving on, so I can add in, we can see we have a time here, so for 1 hour. So I will add in a duration, and it will convert that into 1 hour as well. And so one thing as well, you'll see this little tick box where it says include in the total time. And so what that means is if I'm putting in this duration, it will update this duration here to reflect the time I put in here. And then it will update the duration of, for example, the entire protocol. And so I can have these times be added into the estimated time of the entire protocol. So if someone's looking at that, they might know that this protocol is going to take 1 day or 1 week, things like that. And then we also have a temperature here, and I can add that in as a temperature component. So I can add in a specific value, or I can add in other things. So I put room temperature as well. You can select that. Although if we are thinking about it, kind of best practices for reproducibility, we know that between labs, room temperature one place might be different from room temperature another place. So I would encourage you to maybe, where you can, think about being a little bit more specific. For this next section, I've already gone ahead and put in some examples of some of the other computational components that you can add into a protocol, maybe that we didn't see in the example before. So some different software, we can link out to data sets as well. And you've already seen that command. And so all of these can be found via these components on the right here. For any protocol, there might be other supporting files or information that would be relevant to be included, and you can, of course, add all that in on protocols.io. So if you want to be attaching files, for example, you just go up here and attach a file. And so you can either search for files that you've already uploaded into your workspace on protocols.io, or of course, upload one from your computer. So I will go ahead and do that. Actually, I'll just do this one. And so in this case, what you have is, for example, a supplementary PDF, and that is saved attached into the relevant step where you're going to actually be using that resource. I can see I've just had a question come through about the temperature component. So I can go ahead and answer that now. So what is the advantage of adding, for example, the temperature as a component as opposed to plain text? So that's a good question. So different, some components have more advantages to adding them in as a component versus plain text. So I'll show you specifically things like the amount. For the temperature one, really the advantage of adding these in terms of components is thinking about the greater kind of reproducibility picture. So I didn't talk about it too much at the start. But there are recommendations across for FAIR research outputs. So that stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And so when you put all of these pieces of information in as components, it's a lot easier for the system to read them. And then when people search for your protocol, protocols.io knows that all of this information is there with that protocol. So maybe for you as an individual, you can decide if adding the temperature in as a plain text or a component is worth it for you. It can be nice as well to have it highlighted as an important variable, just visually distinguishable. So that's something that needs to be checked as someone's running the experiment, making sure that they are setting that temperature correctly. But it's a little bit more broadly about a piece of structuring that data in a way that it can be read and understood. Similarly with the reagents, when you add a reagent in, let's scroll up, um, and you can go, and I'll show you this later, and see all of the protocols that use that specific reagent, for example. So it's kind of thinking a little bit more about how we can structure this data a little bit better. I hope that answered your question, Martin, but we can talk about it more at the end as well if you'd like. So going back in here to step 8, we can add in various other images as well. So I'll just go ahead and do that now as well. And so if we think about, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So when you're drafting that protocol, it can be nice to include images of specific steps where possible. And you can add in, of course, figure legends, change various things. And if you want to add in this alternative text, that can also help with the accessibility of your protocol. I can go ahead and resize it as well. So similarly with the images, it can also be a lot more helpful if you do have a video of how you carry out that step. And so I have an example video here. I think it's going to be an ad. That's okay. So this is a video on DNA electrophoresis. So if I go ahead and I click share, what I can do is I can embed this video into my protocol. So make sure after clicking share that you click on embed and then copy this text here. And when it comes to my protocol, I can then go up to this embed media, paste that information in and save that. And so then I have that directly into my protocol. So it can be nice to embed a video, especially if you have a long video. There are limits to the kind of the size of things that can be uploaded to the protocol. And that's outlined in our help center here. So if you do have a video that's larger than this, I'd recommend uploading that somewhere separate and embedding it. But if it is a really short video, just and under this size, you can also upload it directly to the protocol, and you can do that via this insert image/video button rather than the embed media. So that's something to keep in mind. And then you can also add in a table. And so it's not just a table format, but you can add in formulas and other functionality just like you can in Excel. I can come in, I can right click on these titles here and rename them, but I would actually recommend leaving those headers as they are and just putting your title in here. Because if you do want to use formulas, it can be useful to know, depending how big your table is, what column is A, B, C, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you might, for example, want to use this table for calculating information on maybe the total volume that you need for all of your samples as a fairly basic system. So I will put in some information here. So then if I have, let's say, 25 mil volume in 32 samples. I can then go equals. And you do at the moment have to type in the cell references. So I'll go A2 times B2, and it will calculate that out for me. So this is, it can be nice to have it within the protocol rather than doing these calculations in a separate Excel file that might be, updated separately from the protocol. The location of it might be moved. Now you can have all of this in one spot. And so this is a fairly basic example, but you can, of course, do some more complicated calculations as well. And if we think about when we're running this protocol, which I'll show in a moment, so I could delete these and have this as blank information that when someone is actually filling out and following this protocol, they can put in whatever is relevant to them and have that calculate out. So similarly as well, you can add in plate maps. So what I have here is you can of course, if you have it in a separate Excel file, some people um, map out their plate maps like that. You can attach it in. But what I'm going to show is our plate map component here today. And so it's down here in the bottom in components. And so you can choose a variety of sizes. You can also choose a custom size. But what I'm going to do today is import to show you actually how I'm importing this Excel file. And so this is the file that I'm importing. And so it knows that it's a 96 well plate. We can see it's attached there. And I'm going to click create. And so it's pulled all of that information across. So it does pull across the values. Unfortunately, it doesn't pull across the color coding, but I can add that in relatively easily. So if I see the different options here, you can, of course, edit the cell colors one by one, but I don't know about you, I don't want to do that for 96 individual wells. And so I would recommend creating a template. And so I've already gone in and created a template that I know fits this plate format. And when you are creating these templates, you can shift and select multiple cells, and it's a lot easier to change that coloring. So I'm going to select that for my well plate map today. And so we can see there that, for example, the negative controls, the positive controls, and the values um, are in the relevant spots. And I can also come in if I do want to, for example, edit individual cells, I can do that. Let me zoom in. And so I can zoom in and out, but you can also, if it is a large full plate, view it in full screen mode as well. And I will zoom out here. So to finish up here, I'm being a little bit slow today with what I'm getting through. You can add in what we call a smart component, and this is where it's reminding people to fill in key pieces of data as they are following that. So if I go into components, I can find my smart component. You see, here it is. And so I might want to do, for example, we'll do a similar example. And if I mark them as required, um, that value will need to be filled in when someone's running this protocol before they can move on. So I'll mark that in there. And so we can see that this is creating this blank information. And so I can't fill this in when I'm editing the protocol, but I can fill it in when I'm running the protocol. And I'll show you how to do that in a moment. If this is capturing key pieces of information as well, I can download that information later if I'm going to be using it, for example, in further calculations or analyses. Last two options here before I move on to run. You can nest another protocol within a protocol, and I've put an example here so I can preview. This is a short protocol on how to make just a solution of salt. But we see people use this when, for example, you might have a protocol on how to create a certain buffer. And then if I'm using that buffer in this protocol, I can say, add buffer X, and then I can link out to the protocol describing how to make buffer X. When I do nest a protocol as well, what I can have happen is all of the steps of that protocol will expand and can be followed in the run. I'll show you that as well when we do that. And last but not least is the ability to add in what we call a step case. And this is where you are branching a protocol. So you might have steps 1 to 13 are going to be the same, but then at step 14, you're going to be, for example, selecting what type of cells you're going to be working on or other different situations. And then each of those situations can have a different set of steps associated with it. So if I add in a step case for this example, I'm going to say that there's going to be a certain set of steps for kidney cells. I'm only going to put in the case title, but there is the opportunity to put in a lot of more information, explaining a bit more why you want to use each case. You can add in what you need to. So I've got one case right now, and I'll need to add another branch. And so each of these branches don't have any steps right now, but I can add those in. And so when I'm viewing this protocol, so I'll go ahead and click on view. This is what people will be able to see. So they all get to this point and they need to choose if they're working on kidney cells or liver cells. So right now, I don't have any steps. I didn't add any steps for kidney cells. And you can see that these are the steps for liver cells. One thing to keep in mind is that when you do branch a protocol, you can't bring it back together yet. So think about how you might want to arrange your information. Maybe you'll need to separate them out into separate protocols if you do want to bring it back together. And so now when it comes to someone running this protocol, they can click on this run button. And I'm going to go ahead and start the run now. And so it turns all of those steps into a checklist that I can fill out as I'm completing those steps when running my experiment. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to skip straight down to this protocol that I nested in. And so we can see it's gone ahead and as sub-steps, so 13.1 to 13.4, it's put in that protocol that I nested in. And so I'm actually going to follow that because this is a nice example. I can come in, I can mark that as completed, and it's going to be recording who's completed that step and when they have completed it. And then you can see I've put all of this information into components. And if I do that, it's very useful if I want to come up and I can scale the entire protocol, or I can scale an individual step. And so I can come in and I can edit the steps to change it to be what I actually completed in, for example, the lab that day. add in other components, or I can go in to settings here when I'm editing, and I can scale that step by, for example, 3. And you can see it will do that calculation for me, let me know that it has been scaled. And then, so similarly here with the timer component, that works like a real timer that will run, a sound will go off in the lab as well. And then hopefully if I'm just making a solution of salt, it will be colorless. So I can add that in there. If you do have things like observations as well, you can add them just into the step or in as a comment as well to help alongside the relevant information alongside the relevant step. So that is a little bit about the run functionality. I do go into it more in, or probably in the same amount in our introductory webinar as well. And so every step in this run, it remains editable until I click Finish Run. And then it becomes an uneditable record of exactly how that experiment was followed. So I'll go ahead and click Finish there. So in the interest of time, I'll move on quickly to the task manager. And so if you are managing a lab, you can assign specific protocols or just tasks separate from protocols to individuals within your workspace. So if you're in a workspace, you can go in to open the information there and click on tasks, and then that will take you to the task manager, which I already have open here. So you can see I've already added a couple of tasks. So this is the example that I prepared for today. I'm going to go ahead and open that task. When you are creating a new task, the first thing that you'll need to do is give that task a title, which I've already done, and then click Save at the top. Then after you've done that, any other changes that you make to the protocol will be, or to the task, sorry, will be saved automatically. And so you can see I've already, you can go up here and you can search for what protocol you want to attach into that task. So I've already added one here. And then within that protocol, I can assign that to an individual person, assign that to myself, for example. And I can assign myself the entire protocol, or maybe people are going to be working collaboratively on that protocol. And I just want to assign steps 1 to 5 to myself. I can also assign a specific date range as well to this individual protocol. I won't go ahead and do that. Wait for that to load. And then I can add someone else. That's my boss. I'll make her do the rest of the protocol. And so then I can say steps 6 to 13 are assigned to Emma. And so I can break a protocol up. I can also add other protocols here, so it doesn't just have to be one. I can assign a group of protocols within one specific task. It's being a little bit slow today. And I can also put other information in here. So if we think about that, the people who are going to be following that protocol are here, I can also add in other assignees on the task level rather than the protocol level. So if these maybe are the PhD students who are going to be following that protocol, I've assigned them to the individual protocol, but I can add in the postdoc to the overall task because I know they're going to be advising or managing the work, or just for them to have visibility as well. And so all of that is saved as I've done it. And so I can go in and people can come in and they can edit that task, move it to be in progress or closed. If I'm have multiple people in my lab who are running multiple protocols, I can see on what days they're going to be doing that as well. So that's a quick overview of the task manager. And then we also have a reagent manager, which again, I would need to go here into my workspace, click on manage reagents. And I also have that open for a different workspace. I'll reopen it. And so you can have a list of reagents that are used in your lab and are going to be relatively linked as reagents within a protocol. So you can see I've got a couple of reagents listed here. And so you can just have the list of reagents. You can also go in and uh, edit that. And so if you edit this, I can, for example, put all of this relevant information in, where it's located, when it was last ordered, things like that. And so similarly, if I click on, and I'm going to open this reagent page, so sodium chloride's fairly standard, but I can see what protocols are using that specific reagent. And so if it was, something more detailed like an antibody, I could see maybe what kind of other protocols are using that antibody, how they've carried out the specific steps, and that can help you maybe with troubleshooting or optimizing your protocol as well. And then one thing with reagents as well is that you can see I can add in a new reagent here. You don't have to add them one by one. If I do go in to create a new reagent, you'll see there's an upload reagents button. And so then if you have an Excel file in this format, you can upload that and then all of your reagents will be in Protocol Studio. So the last thing on our list to cover today is collections. And I will show you an example of a collection on Protocol Studio. And so a collection is where you have multiple protocols that are associated with a single group of work. So this, for example, is a collection of all of the protocols associated with this paper in PLOS Biology. And so you can see all of those protocols linked here. So each of these protocols, they have their own, they're published, they have their own DOIs associated with them. But when I've put them into this collection, the collection itself also has a DOI. So people can cite the collection rather than individual protocols. And I can do that as well in my paper. And this can be very helpful if you do have a lot of protocols attached to your paper, or if you want someone to know that a protocol is part of a bigger piece of work and be able to find those other protocols easily. When I click on this one, for example, I can see that it's part of what collections it's part of. So it's very easy to create a new collection. So if I go into my workspace, all I need to do is click and then shift click to select multiple protocols and click on new collection. And then just where I want to save that collection. I won't go ahead and do that because I already have one created. Whoops. I'm moving cross workspaces here. And so this is my collection. So I can do it with my files. I can also add in other files that I've already published, for example, and I can add more in by searching here. And then I can go into view and publish that collection. So when I do publish the collection, it will also, if these protocols aren't published, it will make me publish the protocols that are part of that collection as well. So that is all the topics that we had to cover today. I will move back into the slides. I have a couple to show before we finish up today. Um, So to finish up today, obviously we can only cover so much in a 1 hour webinar. So if you are interested in accessing further resources, you can do that in multiple different ways. So I would recommend checking out our help center. We have various articles kind of explaining step by step how to do different things. We also have short video tutorials that you can watch, and you can always submit feedback and ask a question. The team is really good at getting back to people to answer questions. Similarly, if you're running into any issues, you'll know about the webinars because you're attending one today. And so we do run those 3 times a month across multiple different time zones. There's 3 different topics. One's an introduction, one's the tips and tricks that you're at today, and then the other one is a little bit more focused on publishing and getting credit for method development. If you are interested in watching any of previous webinars, this is where you can access them. If you want tailored help, you can book a personal one-on-one demo, and that would be a Zoom call with either me or one of my colleagues, and we can talk you through and answer any questions that you do have. Also, if you are kind of wanting to promote methods sharing or reproducibility at your university, you can also request a dedicated webinar as well. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can email info@protocols.io. Um, and then just a recommendation, it's a good time to start thinking about methods sharing because there are many journals and publishers that do that recommend sharing your protocols on protocols.io. And we can see some of them listed here as well. So thank you very much for listening today. Before we go in the Q&A, I'll just call out this webinar feedback survey here. So while we are going through the questions, if you can fill that out, we really appreciate it. It helps us make sure that what we present in these webinars is as helpful as relevant as possible. So I'll put that link to the feedback survey into the chat as well. And then, yeah, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. So let me check if anything's come through. Okay, so I think, yes, I've already answered Martin's question. No worries. Thanks for listening. And I don't see any coming through in the Q&A, so I'll give it a couple of minutes. What I can do as well is if people are more comfortable asking questions off the recording, I can turn off the recording in a moment.